By what year will the Social Security Trust Fund be depleted, triggering automatic benefit cuts of 23%? The Social Security Trust Fund will be depleted by 2034, after which automatic benefit cuts of 23% kick in, and Congress has done literally nothing to prevent it for 40 years. The fund's exhaustion is a result of simple arithmetic. The number of workers paying into Social Security has been decreasing since 2000, while the number of beneficiaries has been increasing. This means that for every dollar taken in through payroll taxes, there are fewer dollars available to distribute as benefits. The trust fund's reserves will be depleted by 2034, but the program itself won't go bankrupt until 2096. That's a long time for Congress to delay making tough decisions. The original architects of Social Security designed the system to be sustainable, but they assumed certain economic conditions that no longer apply. The baby boomers' retirement has put an unprecedented strain on the program, and it's clear that changes are needed. So how does Social Security actually get funded? To pay out benefits every month, there are three main sources of money that come into the system. The first source is payroll taxes, also known as FICA, Federal Insurance Contributions Act. These are the taxes you see deducted directly from your paycheck. Let's break it down. 6.2% goes to Social Security, and that amount gets split between you and your employer. You pay 6.2% out of every dollar you earn up to the wage cap, which is around $160,000 right now. Your employer pays the same amount, so together, that's 12.4% going straight into Social Security. The second source of funding comes from interest earned on the trust fund's investments. When you pay your payroll taxes, they don't just get deposited directly into the trust fund. They're invested in a variety of assets like treasury bonds and corporate stocks. The returns on these investments are then added to the trust fund. The third source is interest paid by the general government. This is also known as interest on debt. When the U.S. runs a budget deficit, it needs to borrow money from various sources, including itself through treasury bonds. The Social Security Trust Fund gets some of that interest income. Now these three streams get combined to pay out benefits every month. But here's the thing, the trust fund is not like your bank account or your 401k. It doesn't directly fund individual benefit payments. Instead, it serves as a kind of credit line for Social Security. When payroll tax revenue falls short of projected levels, the trust fund makes up the difference by drawing down its reserves. Think of it like writing a check on an overdraft. You know the money will be there eventually. But what happens when those reserves run dry? That's where we'll dive in next time. So what does it mean when we say Social Security is going bankrupt in 2034? The media loves this term because it sounds apocalyptic, but it's not accurate. What's actually happening is that the trust fund will run out of money to pay for full benefits as promised. This is true for a lot of people, but not everyone. If you're under 55 and haven't worked long enough, your Social Security benefit is not fully funded by payroll taxes. You might be surprised at how much of your benefit comes from the trust fund. But if you're 60 or older, most of your benefit is already paid for through past earnings. The thing that's often misunderstood is that Social Security isn't going bankrupt in a way that means it will shut down like Lehman Brothers did in 2008. The U.S. government can always print more money to cover the shortfall, but that would be inflationary and unfair to those who are already paying taxes on their Social Security benefits. So what's really at stake here? Not bankruptcy, but a cut in benefits. If Congress doesn't act, trust fund depletion means everyone's benefit will be reduced by about 23%. That might not sound like the end of the world, but it's still a significant reduction for millions of people who rely on Social Security as their main source of income. But here is the thing. We're already seeing this reduction happen in smaller increments every year. The trust fund has been slowly shrinking since 2016 because Congress hasn't raised the payroll tax cap or increased revenue from other sources like Medicare taxes. 7 fixes Congress could pass tomorrow. So we've looked at a problem, but what about some solutions? The Social Security Trust Fund's financial outlook might be grim, but there are realistic fixes that could prevent benefit cuts. These aren't just fantasies. They're actual policies lawmakers have proposed or implemented in the past. Let's start with increasing payroll taxes. Right now, workers contribute 12.4% of their earnings to Social Security. Some experts suggest raising this rate by a percentage point or two to shore up the trust fund. This might sound like a small tweak, but it would generate billions in additional revenue each year. Another solution is to raise the cap on earnings subject to Social Security taxes. Currently, only income above $147,000 is taxed for Social Security purposes. Raising this threshold or eliminating the cap altogether would also bring in more money. This policy would be a more progressive way to fund Social Security, as it would redistribute wealth from the top 1% of earners. Some experts recommend means testing benefits for higher income recipients. This wouldn't be a drastic change. In fact, most recipients would see little difference. But by targeting those who need it least, we could free up more resources for the rest of the system. We could also address the trust fund's financials by investing some of its assets in equities or other investments. This would generate returns and help the trust fund grow faster. Of course, there are risks involved with any investment strategy, but this approach has been used successfully by pension funds and endowments for decades. Another fix is to adjust benefit formulas so they keep pace with inflation. Right now, Social Security benefits increase annually based on the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. But this doesn't account for changes in healthcare costs or other expenses that are driving up prices faster than inflation. By adjusting benefit formulas to reflect these real-world increases, we could ensure Social Security benefits keep pace with living standards. Some lawmakers propose raising the retirement age gradually over time. This might seem like a draconian solution, but it would actually help Social Security's finances by reducing its reliance on younger workers. By spreading out benefits over more years, we could reduce the strain on the system. Finally, some experts recommend diverting some of the revenue generated by other government programs into Social Security. This could come from sources like Medicare or even corporate tax revenue. By tapping these alternative funding streams, we could supplement Social Security's finances without burdening workers. These fixes might not be a silver bullet, but they're realistic solutions that Congress could pass tomorrow. They wouldn't require any radical changes, just some creative thinking and bipartisan cooperation. By working together, we can find ways to strengthen Social Security without sacrificing benefits for current recipients. So why hasn't Congress solved this problem yet? The answer lies in politics, and it's not just about partisanship. Both parties have a stake in maintaining the status quo. The Democrats are hesitant to cut benefits because their base relies on them. Think of all the retirees who voted for Biden, who depend on Social Security checks every month. Cutting those benefits would be a betrayal of that trust. On the other hand, Republicans don't want to raise taxes or increase contributions from the wealthy. They've already promised their donors that they won't touch any tax breaks. So what's left? Cuts to benefits. But even that's tricky because it means taking away from people who rely on those benefits. This is a classic example of the prisoner's dilemma, where both parties are incentivized to act in their own self-interest, but ultimately end up at an equilibrium that leaves everyone worse off. The problem is further complicated by the fact that both parties have different ideas about what to do with Social Security. Democrats want to raise taxes and increase contributions from high-income earners. Republicans want to means test benefits, reducing payouts for higher-income recipients. But here's the thing. Neither of these solutions gets at the root of the problem. They're just band-aids on a bullet wound. The real solution requires some hard choices about what kind of society we want to be. Do we value fairness and equality, or do we prioritize individual responsibility? One potential solution is to raise the cap on payroll taxes, which currently applies only to earnings above $137,700. This would generate more revenue for Social Security without affecting most Americans' paychecks. Another option is to means test benefits at a higher income threshold, say $250,000 or more. This would ensure that those who have accumulated wealth through other means aren't relying on Social Security checks. Ultimately, solving the Social Security problem will require some combination of these solutions and others. But it's not just about policy, it's also about politics. Congress needs to find a way to work together on this issue, or else they'll be facing an even bigger crisis in 2034 than the one we're facing now. So let's switch gears and talk about what workers should plan for in light of these potential benefit cuts. As I mentioned earlier, Social Security is a pay-as-you-go system, which means that current workers fund benefits for current retirees. But with fewer workers supporting more beneficiaries, the math starts to get dicey. If Congress doesn't act and we hit the so-called cliff, in 2034, Social Security will need to cut benefits by roughly 23% across the board. But that's not a fixed number. It can vary depending on inflation, interest rates, and other factors. So what does this mean for workers like you? It means you'll need to adjust your retirement math, taking into account these potential cuts. You might want to consider delaying retirement or working part-time longer, just to make up for the lost benefits. Another option is to prioritize other sources of income, like pensions or annuities, which might be less affected by Social Security changes. Or you could explore alternative ways to generate retirement income, such as real estate investing or dividend-paying stocks. Of course, no one likes the idea of adjusting their plans midstream, but it's essential to stay adaptable in the face of uncertainty. By thinking ahead and planning accordingly, you can minimize the impact of these potential benefit cuts on your retirement goals. Word count: 397 words, slightly under target. So what's next? You've heard about the problem, you know how it's funded, and you understand that bankruptcy isn't actually a choice. Now it's time to talk solutions. For Congress, the best thing they could do right now is pass one or more of the 7 fixes we discussed earlier. These are not partisan. These are just common sense ways to shore up the system for future generations. But what can individual workers like you do? First, start planning for a reduced benefit. We're not talking about cutting back on your lifestyle now, but rather adjusting expectations for when you retire in 10 or 20 years. Second, take advantage of catch-up contributions to your own retirement accounts if you haven't already done so. This means maxing out those extra contributions above the standard limit as soon as possible. And finally, don't be afraid to speak up and contact your representatives about this issue. It's their job to represent you after all, and they need to hear from people like you who are concerned about the future of Social Security. If you want more like this, subscribe at Premi Chart 1. We publish 3 videos every weekday. A market brief at 6 in the morning, a short at 9, and a long-form explainer at 11, all Mountain Time. See you in the next one.